So till now we have discussed that environmental movements manifest itself in global and local context, and the mechanism through which the local movements emerge as global struggles, emerge as global movements, is through diffusion and scale shift of a movement. And as I just discussed, the scale shift takes place through three different mechanisms: through relational networks, through non-relational networks, and through mediated networks. So let us now take an empirical example of environmental movement from the state of Odisha in eastern part of India to understand how this scale shift takes place and how the perspectives or how the context of local and globality or local and global is breached in the context of environmental movements. I am going to present here the case of Save the Niyamgiri movement, or the Niyamgiri movement, which may be considered as a classic case which defy the geographical boundaries and which create disjuncture between place of origin and space of contestation. The Niyamgiri movement, or Save the Niyamgiri movement, started as a local tribal resistance over the issue of land acquisition. So the issue for emergence of the movement is degradation of local resources. The issue was the case of livelihood. The issue was the local case of land acquisition for construction of a development project. But this movement of land acquisition, which is essentially a local issue, turned out to emerge as a transnational environmental movement by 2006. So a movement which originated in 2002 as a local struggle, as a local protest, expanded itself to emerge as one of the transnational environmental movements of contemporary times in India. So to understand this, we need to understand the role of networks in the Niyamgiri movement, the role of networks in Save the Niyamgiri struggle, and how scale shift and diffusion takes place between local and global in the context of this environmental movement. Or let us discuss the case of Save the Niyamgiri movement to understand scale shift and diffusion and the connection between global and local in environmental movements in contemporary times. Let me tell the story of Niyamgiri. Niyamgiri is the hill range situated in the Kalahandi and Rayagada district of western or southern part of Odisha. These hills are home to several tribal communities, especially the Kondh tribes. There are different kinds of Kondh tribes who reside in these hills, especially the Kutia Kondh tribe, the Jarnia Kondh tribe, and the Dongriya Kondh tribe. These are the three primitive tribal groups who reside in these hills. Government of Odisha signed an MOU to mine bauxite from Niyamgiri hills and establish an aluminium factory in the Lanjigad or in the foothills of the Niyamgiri. This MOU was signed with the Vedanta Resources. So the Vedanta Resources was supposed to construct an aluminium refinery factory in the foothills of Niyamgiri in the Lanjigad in the border between Rayagada and Kalahandi district. And the Vedanta Resources was also supposed to mine bauxite from the Niyamgiri hills. But the mining project, or the proposed mining project, raised several issues of concern. This raised issues of deforestation and loss of biodiversity, threat to life and livelihood of the Dongriya tribes or the local people. It also raised the concerns of displacement of several villages for the construction of the aluminium factory or for the refinery factory. And one of the important issues that this proposed mining raised was a violation of religious and cultural beliefs of the local tribal communities. With these local issues, or with these issues at concern, Save the Niyamgiri movement began as a local tribal mobilization against the issue of land acquisition in the year 2002. So the tribal communities mobilized themselves at the local level, and the central issue of this movement was that of land acquisition and displacement. While the movement emerged as a grassroots protest, as a local tribal protest, by 2006 or within 4 years, Save the Niyamgiri movement emerged as a global environmental movement with manifestations and mobilizations transgressing beyond local. Let us understand how this scale shift and diffusion took place in this particular environmental movement. As I told that the movement emerged as a local issue, as a local tribal protest against land acquisition and displacement, but it ultimately emerged or turned out to be a global environmental movement with issues of global concern and with mobilization at different levels. Viewed from the perspective of the scale shift and diffusion of social movements, we may say that both relational and mediated diffusion basically shaped the nature, identity and the content of the Niyamgiri movement. The contentious politics of Niyamgiri was able to transgress the social, political and geographical boundaries due to the network of social movement organizations. So therefore, the central factor which led to transgression of this movement, to expansion of this movement, is that of social movement organizations who mediated among themselves, who networked among themselves, and that led to expansion of the movement beyond the local. So therefore, we need to understand the diffusion of Niyamgiri movement through relational and mediated networks. If we see the history of Save the Niyamgiri movement, we may divide this movement in two phases. The incidents that took place from 2002 till 2004 and 5, and the events that took place after 2006 or from 2006 onwards. In the initial years from 2002 till 2005, movement diffusion in the case of Save the Niyamgiri movement took place through relational networks, or in the sense that through different social movement organizations who knew each other, or among whom there is sufficient levels of societal ties. In the year 2002 or from 2002 to 2004, in the case of Save the Niyamgiri movement, local tribal resistance emerged in the form of issues of land acquisition. As I just told, that in the beginning the issue was intensely local in nature. It was about local displacement issues, it was about local land acquisition issues, and therefore the tribals mobilized themselves with their conventional primordial social loyalties, or with their local clans and caste groups. They mobilized themselves and they protested against the issue or against the process of land acquisition. So therefore, the affected villages organized themselves with the help of the local Marxist and social movement organizations, and they formed a Niyamgiri Suraksha Samiti, or the Niyamgiri Suraksha Samiti, the association to save the Niyamgiri, that was formed as an umbrella organization which spearheaded this movement. The Niyamgiri Suraksha Samiti, or the NSS, mobilized the tribals on the issues of forest, water and land. So these three issues, Jal, Zameen and Jungle, water, forest and land, that became crucial issues for struggle, because most of the tribal depend upon the three resources for their livelihood, and that emerged as the crucial element or as the crucial factor for struggle. However, gradually the scale shift in the case of Save the Niyamgiri happened when new organizations, when new social movement organizations joined the movement and mediated between different organizations. With the joining of the important organizations like ActionAid, which coordinated with the NSS or the Niyamgiri Suraksha Samiti, and together they both reached out to other communities both inside the forest and in the foothills. And therefore, it is the NSS or the Niyamgiri Suraksha Samiti that coordinated with other like-minded organizations, and they formed an association, they formed a networking with which the movement expanded from that of the Niyamgiri villages, from that of the Niyamgiri foothills, to that of a regional movement involving other participants from the nearby districts, and gradually the movement also, or the focus of the movement, the focus of struggle gradually shifted from that of the Niyamgiri foothills to that of the district headquarters, and gradually to the state capital. So what I am trying to say, that how did this movement expanded from that of a tribal village to that to the regional level, or to a non-local level. This expansion took place, or this expansion became possible only with the help of networking which took place between relational organizations, means organizations which had previous social ties, organizations which had previous social relations. So different local organizations, different social movement organizations at the local level, they coordinated among themselves, and that helped in scaling, that helped in shifting the scale of the movement, that helped in expanding the movement from that of a grassroots to the district level or to the state level. However, the issue did not stop here. Gradually, Save the Niyamgiri movement expanded to the international level, to the global level, with protest events taking place at cities like London, where the Vedanta Resources had its headquarters, because Vedanta Resources was an international company, and the focus of contestation, or the space of contestation, that shifted from the local tribal villages, from the foothills of Niyamgiri, to that of the headquarters of the Vedanta Resources, which was held responsible for displacing these tribals and creating an environmental degradation in the area. From 2005 onwards, significant vertical shift of scale took place in the Save the Niyamgiri movement, with involvement of crucial activities and organizations who mediated to connect the grassroots level tribal organizations with that of other like-minded organizations at the national and international level. We may identify two different kind of networks here. One is mediated national network, where different national level networks which were at the district level or state level, they coordinated between the local grassroots level organization with that of some of the national organizations, especially when the NAPM or the National Alliance for People's Movement that got associated with the Niyamgiri movement. Niyamgiri expanded itself to emerge as one of the national issues. Similarly, several international organizations like ActionAid, like Foil Vedanta, like Survival International, they also associated themselves with the movement, and they also formed a networking with the local Niyamgiri Suraksha Samiti or the NSS, which was spearheading the mobilization. So therefore, by 2005, Save the Niyamgiri movement has shifted its scale from that of being a grassroots level tribal struggle to that of a global environmental movement, a global movement against capitalist development, against environmental degradation. And this shift in scale or this expansion of the movement took place because of networking among several social movement organizations. Here I would like to draw your attention to the definition of social movement by Christopher Roots. Instead of focusing upon identity and organization, which are usually highlighted when we define social movement, Christopher Roots defined environmental movements as organized and unorganized networks who share a similar concern for nature. Perhaps that definition becomes so much applicable in this context, where Save the Niyamgiri movement emerged as a local struggle for the issue of land acquisition, but gradually turned out to be a global environmental struggle, raising issues of loss of biodiversity, raising issues of deforestation, raising issues of human rights, and raising issues of race and ethnicity. What are the visible changes in the case of Niyamgiri movement so far as this relational diffusion or mediated diffusion is concerned? With this diffusion and change in the scale of the movement, there occurred a change in the site of the struggle. While in the initial years, the site of the struggle was that of the foothill of the Niyamgiri hills in the tribal villages of the Kalahandi and Raigada district of Odisha. This movement shifted the site of struggle to that of the state capital, the national capital, and even in international localities or international spaces, like as I told in the city of London, where Vedanta Resources had its headquarters, or it had its where Vedanta Resources had its headquarters. So this networking resulted or helped in shifting the site of struggle from that of local to non-local, and this non-local may involve a wide range of spaces, including from district headquarters to that of state level to national level and to that of an international level. Secondly, this diffusion and scale shift also helped in changing the meaning and issues of the movement. As I told, that networking helps in changing the meaning, issues, identity and manifestation of an environmental movement. And in this context, the issue of contestation changed from displacement due to land acquisition, which is essentially a local issue, to that of larger issues of law, humanity, human rights, environment and indigenous community. Because the way in which the movement was portrayed at a global level is that of an issue of loss of biodiversity, deforestation due to mining, issues of loss of religious and cultural beliefs of indigenous communities. So these issues became prominent at the global level. And diffusion or scale shift in the Niyamgiri movement also helped in change in identity of the movement from that of an anti-displacement movement to that of an environmental movement. This also resulted in change in the strategy of mobilization from preservation of ecological balance, restoration of forest, rights of primitive tribal groups, and these became new strategies of struggle. So in that sense, what I am trying to say with the help of this case study or with the help of this empirical example of environmental movement is that What is important to understand about contemporary environmental movements is the global-local linkages. These movements may emerge as local protest, as local mobilization, but they do not necessarily remain as local protest, because the issues that they raise, because the resources that they want to preserve is of global significance. The third conclusion or the third lesson that we learn from this Niyamgiri case is that instead of considering environmental movements as local struggles in defense of livelihood, when we see the literature concerning environmental movements, we most often we come across the idea that environmental movements are local struggles, especially in the Indian context. Environmental movements are local struggles in defense of livelihood. Like Ramchandra Guha says that environmental movements are local struggles in defense of livelihood, which we discussed in the previous classes. But a critical look at this, or a careful look at this, will tell us that while locality is important, that is not the defining characteristics of environmental movements. Locality or materiality is important to begin a struggle. Locality is important to begin a mobilization. But environmental movements have the potential to expand themselves and build networks with like-minded issues. And the central point is because the issues that they are raising is of global significance. The resources that they are trying to preserve is of global significance. And therefore, there is every possibility that like-minded organizations and individuals will network with the local level, grassroots level mobilization. So therefore, to conclude this module, we may say that what is crucial to understand, to comprehend environmental movement is that of the nexus, the connections, the bridging of the local and global perspectives. These movements may be local so far as action is concerned, so far as mobilization is concerned, but with regard to their ideology, with regard to their implication, these movements are essentially global. So therefore, a small event, a small mobilization at a grassroots level may not be judged based on its locality, its boundary, because the issue that they are raising, the question that they are posing, pertains to a global issue. Essentially, these movements question the industrialism as a way of life. These movements question the uncontrolled economic growth, and they try to build an awareness about ecological limits. They try to build an awareness about benefits that we accrue from environment. So in that sense, environmental movements which aim to preserve the nature, which aims to preserve the humanity, which aims to preserve our ecosystem, builds certain kind of similarity, builds certain kind of unity in humanity. It tries to build a network between different like-minded organizations who have similar concern for nature, who have similar concern for environment. So therefore, to conclude, we may say that environmental movements manifest both in global and local perspectives, both in global and local contexts. Thank you.